Hey, thanks everyone for coming. So I'm going to go over. This is interesting, so I'll just let it flow. It's going to be different than what we're used to when I do some of the other kind of presentations. So I'm going to just sort of fly through this. But I have been meditating for a while, so I've been doing it quite some time. Basically, to help with my wellness and longevity. I did it for kind of what most people do for de-stress. And I had heard that there were meditation retreats, and some of them were kind of like the 10-day silent, but I had no idea what type of meditation it was. I had no idea where they were. And part of me feels like I was looking for that because my Iron Man mentality was starting to stick out a little bit. So I was saying, wonder if I could do this. And a friend of a friend, my friend Kirsten, her friend Cynthia, pointed me to Vipassana meditation. So I was fortunate enough to make that connection. And then, as I looked more into it, it looked like it was the meditation that I wanted to do. And I thought, well, crap, I was looking when I was looking, so maybe other people were looking, so hopefully some of this communication might help. So my course was from May 1st to the 12th, and I ended on a Sunday. We got registration there on a Wednesday, and driving home, obviously the first one I called was Elaine, and I said, I'm really struggling with how am I going to communicate the experience I had. It was a wonderful experience, and I'll be talking a little bit about that. But I was concerned that how was I going to, everybody that asked me, was I going to say it was great, I really had a good time, or was I going to take 30 minutes like we're going to do now and do a dissertation, and that might take a month. And so I started by telling Elaine, so let's get the family together. I want Savannah and Gavin and Ian and you all together so I can at least tell all of you at one time what I went through. I didn't want to tell Elaine. And she said, why don't we just have a get-together? Invite your friends. I can go ahead and videotape it for my friends on social media, and that way I can get it out at one time. So believe it or not, I've not talked to my family too much about really what this was all about. A little bit with Elaine, but not too much. So they're going to all get to hear it at the same time you're going to get to hear it about. And the other thing I want to talk just briefly before I get started is don't take any of this, what I'm saying, as instructions. I think that's a bad idea. This is this process is really meant to be learned through a course. And I'll tell you how I know that is when I did some initial research looking at going to this retreat. I looked at the Vipassana meditation. It was sort of the mindfulness type that I had already been doing. I had read 2 books on it. Pretty good books on the technique. I started practicing the technique. I'd read 2 books on Buddhism. Buddhists use this technique, although this is not a religion. They do use the technique. So I read a couple books on Buddhism. And I was also actually using Sam Harris's app and listening to some of his talks. Sam is a long-time Vipassana sort of kind of expert. He's done the 10-day and the 20-day course. And with all of that, having done all of that, it was nothing like I thought. Like I was not even close to getting out of it what I thought I was getting out of it. So that's important to know. I'm not qualified. I'm a baby on this path of what you can get from what I'm about to talk about, at least for me. And also, some of the experiences I had might not be the same for everybody. So technically, I may have it a little bit off, and some of my friends that took the course with me might say, well, I didn't see that. But anyway, I'm going to come at it from that angle. So I was trying to figure out what is Vipassana meditation. I want to try to give you a little overview so you understand what they're going after with this type of meditation, so you get a sense. Some of you already meditate. Maybe you're thinking about meditating. Maybe you've read about meditation. So I wanted to sort of paint the picture of what Vipassana meditation is all about. And this technique comes from India. It's one of their most oldest techniques. But for a while, it sort of was lost to humanity. And then the Buddha brought it back about 2,500 years ago, and sort of ended up making it mainstream. And again, it's used by the Buddhists, but it's not a religion. There's people of all face that used Vipassana meditation. In fact, during the whole course, there's never a mention of anything about Buddhism. It's strictly a free process for anyone to use. So I was going to try to, in my own words, sort of tell you what this meditation sort of goes after and how it works. But I pulled something that I really liked. It caught my eye when I was looking at the process off of the Vipassana website, and I'm going to read that to you now, if you don't mind. And it's going to be the most efficient way. It takes about 5 minutes, but I think it's going to give you a flavor of what's actually going on here, because you have to hear that. And I'll interject a little bit as we go, just to make sure you know what what's being said here. But I think it's important too to try to think about these words, okay? And these aren't spiritual; they're just they're mindful. Okay, everyone seeks peace and harmony because that is what we lack in our lives. From time to time, we all experience agitation, irritation, and disharmony. And when we suffer from these miseries, we don't keep them to ourselves. We often distribute them to others as well. Unhappiness permeates the atmosphere around someone who is miserable. And those who come in contact with such a person also become affected. Certainly, this is not a skillful way to live. We ought to live at peace with ourselves and at peace with others. But how are we to live peacefully? How are we to remain harmonious within and maintain peace and harmony around us so that others can also live peacefully and harmoniously? In order to be relieved of our misery, we have to know the basic reason for it, the course of the suffering. If we investigate the problem, it becomes clear that whenever we start generating any negativity or impurity in the mind, we are bound to become unhappy. A negativity in the mind, a mental defilement, or impurity cannot coexist with peace and harmony. How do we start generating negativity? We become unhappy when we find someone behaving in a way that we don't like, or when we find something happening which we don't like. Unwanted things happen and we create tension within. Wanted things do not happen, some obstacles come in the way, and again we create tension within. We start tying knots within. And throughout life, unwanted things keep on happening, wanted things may or may not happen, and this process of reaction, of tying knots, makes the entire mental and physical structure so tense, so full of negativity that life becomes miserable. So we don't often think about the effects of outside. So when something happens, Joe says something to me, we just sort of generate a reaction, but we're not thinking very deeply about why is that happening? What's going on? What's causing that to happen? And that's what this is saying. Now, one way to solve the problem is to arrange that nothing unwanted happens in life, that everything keeps on happening exactly as desired. But this is impossible. Things constantly occur that are contrary to our desires and wishes. So the question arises, how can we stop blindly when confronted with these things that we don't like? Okay, so when something happens, and you'll notice this, you react sometimes without even thinking. So we're reacting blindly, and so we create this sort of reaction. So how do we stop doing that? In India, as well as other countries, wise saintly persons of the past studied this problem, the problem of human suffering, and found a solution. If something unwanted happened and you start to react by generating anger, fear, or any negativity, then as soon as possible, you should divert your attention to something else. Take a glass of water, start drinking, or count 1, 2, 3, etc. Your anger won't multiply. On the other hand, it'll begin to subside. Responding like this, the mind feels free from agitation. However, the solution works only at the conscious level. By diverting the attention, you push the negativity deep into the unconscious, and there are continued to generate and multiply the same defilement. On the surface, there's a layer of peace and harmony, but in the depths of the mind, there is a sleeping volcano of suppressed negativity, which sooner or later may erupt in a violent explosion. So, we train ourselves. You think about what that's saying is, let's say Joe says something to me, and I create this I get a sensation and create this reaction. The more that happens, I keep creating those reactions. Those reactions sort of build up like an inventory. So we start having these built-up reactions inside. The mind stores these like an inventory, and then when the environment presents itself, that reaction gets exposed. So you have all of these underlying reactions from your experience. Other explorers of inner truth went still further in their search, and by experiencing the reality of the mind and matter within themselves, recognize that diverting the attention is only running away from the problem. Escape is no solution. You have to face the problem. Whenever negativity arises in the mind, just observe it. Face it. As soon as you start to observe a mental impurity, it begins to lose its strength and slowly withers away. This sounds wonderful, but is it really practical? It's not easy to face one's own impurities. When anger arises, it so quickly overwhelms us that we don't even notice. Then, overpowered by anger, we perform physical or vocal actions which harm ourselves or others. So let's say Joe says something to me that I don't like. Okay, my conscious mind perceives that as ill. I don't like it. Okay? So I get the sensation of anger, and I get a reaction of I yell at him, or I get mad at you, or whatever. It creates this automatic reaction of negativity because of a sensation. And when you think about that, like why do we get mad? Like, why do you get mad at something? Are you thinking about that process of, well, what's causing me to be mad? Well, there's a sensation. And so Vipassana meditation talks a little bit about that, but that's what it is. There's a sensation that one has to understand is exposing itself to create this reaction. Okay. The difficulty is that we are not aware when negativity starts. It begins deep in the unconscious mind, and by the time it reaches the conscious level, it has gained so much strength that it overwhelms us, and we cannot observe it. However, someone who reached the ultimate truth found a real solution. He discovered that whenever an impurity arises in the mind, physically two things start happening simultaneously. One, the breath loses its normal rhythm, and we start breathing harder whenever negativity comes into the mind. This is easy to observe. At a subtler level, a biochemical reaction starts in the body, resulting in some sensation. Every impurity will generate some sensation or another within the body. This presents a practical solution. An ordinary person cannot observe abstract defilements of the mind, abstract fear, anger, or passion, but with proper training and practice, it's very easy to observe respiration and body sensations, both of which are directly related to mental defilements. This mental physical phenomenon is like a coin with two sides. On one side, there are thoughts and emotions arising in the mind. On the other side are the respiration and sensations in the body. Any thoughts or emotions, any mental impurities that arise manifest themselves in the breath and the sensations of that moment. Thus, by observing the respiration and sensations, we are in fact observing mental impurities. As a result, we discover that these impurities lose their strength. They no longer overpower us as they did in the past. If we persist, they eventually disappear altogether and we begin to live a peaceful and happy life, a life increasingly free of negativities. In this way, the technique of self-observation shows us reality in its two aspects, inner and outer. Previously, we only looked outward, missing the inner truth. We always looked outside of the cause of our unhappiness. We always blamed and tried to change the reality outside. Being ignorant of the inner reality, we never understood that the cause of suffering lies within, and our own blind reactions towards pleasant and unpleasant sensations. I seem to always think that when I didn't feel right, or I felt like stressed, or whatever that feeling or sensation was, that I had to change the environment, right? Who doesn't do that? If I don't like Joe, I'm changing Joe. You know, if I don't like John, I'm changing John. If I don't like the weather, I'm getting away from it. Instead of understanding what's really, like, if I can change the reaction, well, I've now just changed the whole outcome. It doesn't matter what if it's Joe or not. Okay, so we're winding down here. The direct experience of our own inner reality, the technique of self-observation, is what is called Vipassana meditation. Observing things as they actually are, not just as they appear to be. Apparent truth has to be penetrated until we reach the ultimate truth of the entire psychophysical structure. When we experience this truth, we then learn to stop reacting blindly, to stop creating negativities and naturally the ones are generated eradicated. We become liberated from misery and experience true happiness. The more one practices the technique, the more quickly negativities will resolve. Gradually, the mind becomes free of defilements, becomes pure. A pure mind is always full of love, selfless love of others, and full of compassion for the failings and sufferings of others, full of joy at their success and happiness, full of equanimity in the face of any situation. By learning to remain balanced in the face of everything experienced inside, one develops a detachment towards all that one encounters in external situations as well. However, this detachment is not escapism or indifference to the problems of the world. Those who regularly practice Vipassana become more sensitive to the sufferings of others and to their outmost relief sufferings in whatever way they can, not with any agitation, but with a mind full of love, compassion, and equanimity. They learn holy indifference, how to fully commit and fully involve in helping others, while at the same time maintaining balance of the mind in a way they remain peaceful and happy while working for peace and happiness of others. This is what the Buddha taught, an art of living. He never established or taught any religion, any ism. He never instructed those who came to practice with him any rites or rituals, any empty formalities. Instead, he taught them just to observe nature as it is, by observing the reality inside. Out of ignorance, we keep reacting in ways which harm ourselves and others. But when wisdom arises, the wisdom of observing reality as it is, the habit of reacting falls away. When we cease to react blindly, then we are capable of real action. Action proceeding from a balanced mind, a mind which sees and understands the truth. Such an action can only be positive, creative, and helpful to ourselves and to others. So you learn through practice how to observe your sensations and balance to prevent reactions. So I know that was a little long-winded, but the concept is that you're trying to make yourself more peaceful with everyday life and everything you face by learning how to observe those sensations and then control those reactions. And so you do that, and you're taught to do that through meditation, hard meditation. Okay, so the course, and I'll talk about the schedule, is just a mountain of meditation, but what it happens is it sort of gets you in shape to start to feel those sensations. Because most of us, if you've ever sat and meditated, it becomes excruciating after 10 minutes. Okay, well, you do this for hours, and you learn to control the mind to only observe those sensations. So your legs are uncomfortable, you feel uncomfortable, you want to move, but you train the mind you're just observing those sensations with a very balanced approach. You're not looking for good ones, you're not looking for bad ones, you're just observing. And so this practice, through a life of practice, teaches you, as you experience these things in the real world, when a sensation arises, you observe it and you control that reaction. And so when you see a monk or somebody that's so-called enlightened or nun or whatever, and they're just so peaceful and so calm, they've spent a life of training themselves to not react to those sensations. So anyway, that's kind of an overview. And I took the course in Georgia, in Jessup, Georgia. So about 6 hours away. It was a very nice facility. It was a remote facility. It was away from everything, which really helps because that training, you don't want any distractions. And the facility was set up completely separated, men and women. Okay, there was about 30 to 35 women and 35 men, and we were completely separated. The only time we saw each other was in the meditation hall. So even the dining quarters were separated, women on one end, men on the other. The whole grounds was separated. There was borders. So they didn't want any interaction with women. And there's a reason for that. They have precepts, they call it, that, they say that if you're not living a moral life, while you're practicing some of this, especially as you're learning this, then your mind becomes too agitated. So if you're, and so they want no sexual contact, no stealing, no lying, they say no killing, and no intoxication. Because any of those things are going to make it pretty difficult for you to get focused, right? How are you going to try to clear out some of these reactions when you've just done something wrong? So that's part of that reason. So that's part of the separation. But one thing I noticed as soon as I got there, that everybody there, all the people there, and there's a few managers, but mostly it's staff by volunteer, it was just, they were peaceful. Like, I noticed it. And they do this for a reason. Like, this course is set up so that you actually are living, even though you can't do that all the time, you're living like a monk or you're living like a nun. And they're removing all of these worldly distractions so you can really focus. And focus on the technique and focus on learning what you have to learn through these 10 days. And I didn't get that at first, but I got it once I started to get into it. You could not do this here, with your cell phone, with all the distractions. Your mind will never get, because you'll be thinking about that. You need to get that cleared. So the way the course went, and this course schedule is the same for all of these courses everywhere. So we got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and they got up by ringing like a bell. And if you picture, the monks up in the mountain ringing one of those big gongs, it's not quite like that, but it sounds like that. So we're up at 4. And then another bell goes off at 4:20. That means we got to head over to the meditation hall. And so we meditated. Our first meditation session was from 4:30 in the morning till 6:30 in the morning. And the last 30 minutes of that 6:30, the teachers came in. And by the way, there are 2 male teachers and 2 female teachers. So I failed to mention no cell phones, no journal, no writing, no papers, no talking. Completely silent. The only people you could talk to were your teachers, or if you had a question with management, you could talk to management about your facility. So anyway, in the meditation hall, for that last 30 minutes, for the 4:30 to 6:30, 2 male teachers, 2 female teachers. Breakfast was served at 6:30 till maybe like 6:45, and then we weren't due back in hall till 8. So I didn't do breakfast because it's a vegetarian style. It's more of an Indian kind of menu, but the breakfast was a lot of carbs, more carbs than I was eating, and some cereals. Great food. The food was good, but it was just more than what I generally do, and I don't really eat that early. I don't eat till maybe 10, 11, so I skipped breakfast. But I did morning walk. I did my morning walk before we had to get back at 8 o'clock and just sort of got organized. And before I got there, just an FYI, I was so worried about where I was going to train, how I was going to exercise. The first day before we even started, I'm walking in the woods looking for trees to do pull-ups on, looking for a place I could hide and do some lunges. By the second day, I'm glad. If they would have had the best workout facility in the world, I couldn't have done anything because I was completely exhausted, and you'll hear why as I go on with the schedule. So 8 o'clock breakfast ended. 8 o'clock rest period ended, and so at 10 to 8 bell rang. We had to be in the meditation hall, and this was a meditation session from 8 to 11. And for 8 to 9 was our first what's called structured sit. Okay, all the other meditation periods, you can meditate in the hall or in a cell. And a meditation cell is, some people got a cell, and I'll talk more about that, but it's just a very small, kind of like my sauna out there, where you can meditate in complete silence, complete, away from everything, which is really good to concentrate. But from 8 to 9 is called a structured sit. Everyone had to be in the hall. Teachers were in the hall, and what that structure sit became after the 3rd day, for the first 3 days we only focused on breath, and there was not a lot of rigidity to how you were going to meditate. But from the 3rd day, 3.5 day on, that structured sit for that 1 hour, and we had 3 of them, you were asked not to move, not to change position, okay, for an hour. Okay, so we're in our meditation position now, and this is why. And plus, the time up to that, the 3.5 days up to that, you really had to work on training. If you do meditate, and you want to go ahead and focus on the breath, just the very beginning part of the nose, where the air enters in the nostril, focus your mind as hard as you can. Like, focus it. Like, put it right there, focus it, sit there. Next thing you know, you get a little pain in the leg. Your mind goes to the leg. Next thing you know, you're thinking about work. Next thing you know, you have nothing to do with the breath. And just to try to do that for 30 seconds is a skill, okay? But you got to train yourself to do it so that you can sit for an hour and observe and do things and not move. Okay, and that takes work. But anyway, the first structured sit was from 8 to 9. And then we meditated from 9 to 11. You could change position, but you still worked on that. You tried to work on that concentration to get the mind focused. And I'll talk a little bit about that process. Then 11 o'clock was lunch. And that's why I got my first meal at lunch. So I loaded up with calories. I ate as much as I could eat. Like I had to get everything I could eat for the day in at that time. And then we were supposed to be back in the meditation hall at 1. And so I used that period. I took a 30-minute nap because halfway through there I was kind of feeling a little bit exhausted. Maybe did a little bit of a walk. And then we're back in the meditation hall at 1 until 5. So we had another meditation. Now start counting this up. It's almost 11 hours of meditation every day. And so from 1 to 5, and our second structured sit was from 2:30 to 3:30. So another, teachers come in, structured sit, try not to change position. That's when you really work on the concentration. Train the mind, not let it get distracted, and you're doing some of the course work. We started by learning how to focus on the breath. We spent 3 days trying to concentrate on getting the mind to just feel the breath, focus on the breath. Whenever it wandered, you bring it back to the breath. Whenever it wandered, you bring it back to the breath. And you really work on that and work on that hard. Then once you learn that, then you start to focus on the sensations within the body. So now you're meditating, you're listening to, pay attention to the breath, and now you're scanning the body from head to toe, and you're feeling all of the different sensations. So sometimes you don't feel any sensations. Sometimes you feel pretty gross sensations. Okay? So for me, I struggled. Like those first couple days, I lifted, my leg was sore, I couldn't find a good position, and I couldn't figure out the balance between suffering and torture. And I'll go over that and talk a little bit. But anyway, so we meditated till 5, and then we took a tea break. And if you were an old student, you only had tea. That means if you did the course before, you only had tea. It's kind of a tradition. But a new student, we were allowed to have fruit. So I ate like 5 apples because that was my last meal. And based on my last gut test, I'm not supposed to be eating apples. So I was doing a lot of nutrition gymnastics at this thing to go along with trying to meditate that long. Back in the hall at 6 for another structured sit from 6 to 7. This is our last structured sit of the evening. And after every structured sit, you could go up to the teachers and ask them questions. And I almost used them daily because stuff was going on that I was trying to figure out. I'm like, what's happening here? And they were beautiful people. Like I would talk to these teachers and go, how are you this beautiful? Like, how are you so, they make you feel wonderful. Like, I don't know, maybe that was the course in having its way with me. Then at 7 o'clock, S.N. Glinka, and he's the master, I want to say Vipassana teacher for the last 50 years. Beautiful individual. If you have a chance, look him up. He died in 2013. But when he spoke, you listened to every word he said, and he was just beautiful. And he would every day, and at the beginning of every structured sit, he would give you some instruction and kind of let you know what to focus on. Remember, this is a progression from day 1 to day 10. They're bringing you through this course to be able to do this practice. He would give you instruction, but at the end of every day, for an hour and a half, from 7 to 8:30, he would do a discourse on everything you went through, and he knew what you went through, and he'd talk about all of it, and give you some, kind of encouragement. And his encouragement was always, look, you're here, this is a great opportunity, you're here for 10 days, work hard. You're here to work. This is what you're here. You're here to learn this technique, work hard, work diligently. And he just kept preaching that and preaching that. And at the start of every discourse, he would say, you've just completed day 1. And I remember when he said that, I went, holy shit, I got 9 more days to go. This is going to be brutal. And so that's the course schedule. And you can see that's a tough schedule. In bed, our room at 9, lights out 9:30, up at 4. And dude, I was ready to hit the sack. And I was worried about my diet. I was worried about everything I was doing. And I said, man, all these carbs, I'm going to blow up like a balloon. I couldn't get enough. My brain was sucking glucose out of my body like no tomorrow. If you want to burn some calories and lose some weight, meditate for 11 hours a day. Dude, it'll make you like a rail. Like this, that it just sucked the energy out of me. So I had some key moments, okay? So for me, the beginning was pretty difficult. Like I couldn't get a comfortable position. So in my Ironman way, I was just gutting it out. Like I was truly torturing myself to be able to handle these sits and to try to get my mind focused.
How are you positioned, Joe?
Cross-leg. I sit cross-leg. Yeah, just like
So
you would see it. Yeah, no shoe. Yeah, yep. And so I went to the teacher early on. I said, "Teach," I said, "I'm struggling here," and he knew just from some of the apparel and stuff. He said, "This isn't an Ironman," and he started to talk to me, and I started to realize that part of my problem, part of the things that are being flushed out were not everything is an Ironman. Like I can't look at everything like an Ironman and face it that way. And once I started to understand that, and then I adjusted my position a little bit, then it became a little bit more doable. So I was able to get to that. So talking with the teachers really helped. But then the next big moment for me was all the new students were given a cell at one day during the course, and I got a cell on day 4. So we're talking cell, right? You're in this little outhouse with your cushion. And there's nothing, and you're meditating all day. And man, I got it. Like I was able to sort of hit some moments where I just could feel that. I could feel my sensations. I could feel it all through my body, and my mind was just observing them, and I wasn't reacting to them. And I got the and the other thing is we're made up of atomic matter. I mean, you all know this. This is science. Although the scientists don't use it for meditation, we're just a bunch of atoms and forever changing. So the body's inside always, even though we call ourselves an eye, it's always changing. That structure is just always moving, and so you start to feel those sensations coming and going. So nothing is permanent. And once you start to realize that you can kind of sit through that, you start to get this peace, and you start to realize, wow, if I could practice enough to where I could always do that. Think about that. If you could control and feel these sensations as they came up. John sticks his tongue out at me, and I feel nothing but compassion for him because I don't have a reaction for that. Because the sensation, I just observe it, and I don't really judge it. I don't really feel it as anger. I don't feel it as hatred. I just feel it, right? But it takes practice. And so I meditate, and they recommend you meditate an hour in the morning and an hour at night, and even a little bit while you're in bed. Now, it's a lot of meditation, but it's a lifestyle that you have to kind of learn to sort of, if you don't practice, you're not going to be able to, walk that path, and it's a long path. So you want to learn how to do that. So I started to get it, and I started to appreciate not having the distractions. Not having a cell phone, not having people around. You start, feeling a sense of, man, I don't feel any stress. Like I've been stressful my whole life. I've been in business, I've been racing, doing all this stuff, and I always feel this kind of like tension. And all of a sudden, I'm like, holy shit, I don't feel any tension. Like I just never had, like my mind didn't have anything going on. Like I'd sit and meditate, and there was nothing going on, and it was unreal. Like I'm like, this is the way to go. Like if you could sort of put yourself in control your mind enough where you could bring that feeling on, where you're not just always spinning out of control, it'd be pretty wonderful. And people learn to do that. So the takeaways I got were, certainly there was a sense of calm there, and I still feel that, and maybe that's just a buzz from the course. I'm still kind of a little bit, but I am practicing in good faith, and I feel like it really helps me, and I like it, and I plan to try to continue to do it and see what I can get out of it. And there's a big incentive. Like I learned a little bit also about helping people, and that feeling you can get from doing that. There's a true, if you really kind of engage yourself into what that feels like to help somebody else, that helps bring happiness in. And so, I said, well, that really aligns well with what I'm trying to do with the Fit to 100 thing, is that I can, share with people what I do and really feel good about it. Like it just gave me an incentive to do that. But this was the big one for me. And this can get a little woo-woo, but this is how it hit me. Like I've forever, and I've struggled with, even though I have this passion to live to 100 plus, because I believe we can do that through the right lifestyle, the right wellness, the right balance of performance, nutrition, all that. I've always struggled with how am I going to handle that end of life? Like when it ends, how am I going to handle that? And I've not been big on the blind faith approach. I just haven't. But I've always had this sense of when I'm there, maybe it's where I am. And what Essing Goenka said, and this did it for me. He said, if you want to die happy, you have to live happy. Because your mind is not going to change at that last moment. If your mind is not in that happy state, when you die, that's how you're dying. And I'm going, holy crap, that's it. I believe so much that if you're in this happy state and your mind is in this peaceful state, when the lights go out, that consciousness is just going to go and keep going. And that's it. And I said, what could be worse than working to be happy, right? Like if you're going to work on anything, why not just work to be happy? And because all you're going to do is treat people great, Now, can I do it? Can I do it? I'll let everybody judge that. You know what I mean? Like certainly I didn't wake up after the course and I'm great Joe. Although a couple things have happened around here and I didn't react. I'm like, wow. Good for me. And our teacher said, look, if 10 things happen to you in a day and one of them you're able to kind of get the mind, feel the sensation before you react, that's great. You've made progress. But it takes time. You got to walk the path they call Dhamma for a while before you can actually, have that true happiness in life. So I'm planning on doing that. So my future plans, one, I would absolutely love Elaine to go. I'm not going to give up until I get her to go. I think she's a beautiful person already. I think this will put her over the top. I'd love my children to go. I think Savannah's ripe for something like this. I think it'll really do you wonder. Because this does not do it justice, what I talked about. You have to experience it. And I encourage you to kind of do some research. And, they're not down there going, hey, do a talk when you get back. And if you sign someone up, we'll say, look, there's no charge for this course. It's completely volunteer. People volunteer. I'm going to go back and volunteer, to give back and help. And it's pay forward. You donate if you want, and it puts people like me through and the next person through. But this is they keep this stuff going totally with volunteers and donations. It's incredible. And it's worldwide. There's centers all over the place. So I would love for my wife to take it and be a volunteer. I get to go back as an old student, which means I don't get apples at night, but I get my own room, get a private room, so that'll be pretty awesome. They recommend you do a course at least once a year, because it just puts you, and I can see that. Like I'm almost kind of can't wait to go back. I kind of was upset to leave. I didn't look at my phone, and I didn't even look at my emails for a whole day. It was so nice. Like no phone, no nothing. I'm telling you, it was beautiful. You would have trouble with that, but it was so wonderful. I just hated to have to get back into that again. But if I can get Elaine to go, if not, I'm going to definitely go back and volunteer, and I'll do a course again sometime next year. And I'm looking for structured sittings in the area. I'm looking at different, because I think that's good to go every once in a while and sit with a group and do a sitting. And I will link to Dhamma.org that has information about Vipassana. There's some really good reference stuff out there, and you can really get back into how, environmentally things are coming into the conscious mind. We're perceiving that. A sensation sort of gets generated, and then we react. When you really start to study that and understand how that reaction's taking place, you can really start to get some things under control. The mind's a tough thing to get under control. Just try it. Our mind's out of control. And when you sit, you figure that out. You know, so it takes lots of practice and it takes lots of skill to train the mind. But you can get rid of all that crap. Pretty soon the mind's not generating any of that, and I think that's a wonderful place to strive to be. So anyway.